Hope you're doing well. It's Sunday, so we're thinking about the gospel, and it is the one of the most baffling passages in the New Testament. Actually, it's Luke 16, 1 to 13. It's the parable known as the parable of the dishonest steward, dishonest manager, whatever. It's so confusing. I mean, I spent most of my life trying to figure out what in the world was going on here, because the story is that they've got a rich man and he has a manager. He finds out from somebody that the guy's wasting his assets. So he sends him notice, and he says, "You're fired. I need you to bring the account books." So the guy's already fired. He knows it, but nobody else does, is his hope. So what does he do? He says, well, he sizes up the situation. I want you to see the development of this. He sizes up the situation. Well, I'm never going to get a job doing this again. He didn't even bother to say that. He said, I'm not strong enough to dig and I'm too ashamed to beg. So what am I going to do? I don't have a lot of options here. So he decides then what his goal is. He said, well, if I can get people to take me into their homes and they will provide food and boarding and all that kind of stuff for me, then that can work. So he calls every one of the debtors. And so these are tenant farmers on a rich man's property. So he calls them in and he sees the first one and he says, "Hey, how much you owe?" He said, "I owe 100 measures of oil." And he said, "Just change that and make it 50 because they have to sign off on it." So he changes it and makes it 50. And the next one comes in, "How much do you owe?" He says, 100 measures of wheat. He said, "Okay, take that and mark it down to 80." People get hung up on the percentages, but it doesn't make any difference. Those percentages don't matter because it only matters how much those things are worth, right? I mean, how much is 100 measures of oil worth? How much is 100 measures of wheat worth? Could be very different things. So, all right, so how much is it? We don't have any idea. People have suggested, well, it's his built-in sort of ripoff to the customers. I don't think that's remotely true. So he's the one who has arranged all these things. He's the one who has managed the contracts. So then he goes back, and the owner says, "Shrewd, buddy, shrewd, shrewd, shrewd." Um, and it's easy to get hung up on. Well, so what's the owner thinking here? Well, what he's thinking is he says, look, you sized up the situation, you set your goal, and then you determined a course of action to reach the goal. So bully for you, right? I mean, he has the right to go back and reinstate the contracts and all. It's a parable, right? So don't get all caught up in that stuff. So then what happens is Jesus says that the sons of this age understand how to deal with people in this world in a way that the sons of light do not. And what's he implying there? What he's implying is the guy did a good job at some level, right? He knew, he sized up his situation. He knew what his options were. He chose the option, the dishonest option, and then he seems to have achieved his purpose because he went through the strategy and all that kind of stuff. And that remains to be seen whether that happened or not. It's a parable. I'm gonna tell you that one time. So so what's Jesus implying? That the guy did exactly what I said. He evaluated the situation, he determined what his goal was, and then he figured out a strategy to try to get to that goal. And so he worked the system that he was in. That's a worldview issue. The sons of light, he says, you need to make use of of unrighteous wealth in order to get into the heavenly places. So the sons of light, he says, use the things of earth wisely, is what he's trying to say. It is do the same thing. Evaluate the situation, figure out what your goal is, and then do out a strategy to determine how to get there, and then work that strategy always. And he's right. We typically don't set out to do that. We're trying to make it through life and all that. And Jesus says, navigate towards your goal. Stephen Covey wrote a book a long time ago, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the first principle was begin with the end in mind. And his point was that you're supposed to have, he had gone to a funeral and he heard this wonderful eulogy. And he says, what we need to do is decide who it is we want to be, what we would like people to say about us, and then work towards that. Live a life that would allow somebody to honestly say that at your funeral. And so the challenge then is Jesus looks at and tells his parables based around people who are worldly wise. And he says, you have different goals, you have different aims, you have different wisdom. Live in such a way that you take what it is you have, what he calls unrighteous wealth. And it's unrighteous in the sense that you don't ever know where all the money that you end up with as a business person or even as a pastor in church, to be honest with you, you don't know where that came from. Did it come from dishonest means or whatever? And so all money is tainted at some level in that way. And so he gives good advice. And that's the same thing as Stephen Covey does. Let's begin with the end in mind and then live towards that. Use the things of this world in order that you might be welcomed into the heavenly places. And that's all about discipleship. We want to talk about, oh, I'm saved by faith, saved by faith. Yes, absolutely. Not a single person that I know would disagree with that. My priest wouldn't disagree with that. The Pope wouldn't disagree with that. Nobody would disagree with that you're saved by faith, but you're saved for works. Paul's very clear about that. That those things prove that we actually have faith. And so the way that we live matters. And that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. He says, take a clue from people in this earth who are successful and get the things that they want. Whether they're dishonest or not is an immaterial thing at some level. He says, no, take that same attitude and work towards the goal, but have the right goal in mind and then understand how we get there and use the things of earth in that way in order that you can get there, which means that it's all available to God. Everything about my life should be available to Him at all times, in all ways, however He wants to use it. And that is the wisdom that will carry us through. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.